So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my immense pleasure to be joined on the panel discussion today. On our far right, Mario Apostolov, then Ms. Gitanjali Shah, who is here from the ITU, and I am sure you will appreciate the connection that she will make specific to the use of internet technologies, because I think internet technologies is very much part of our DNA today, and how the ITU has used a very, very interesting and a highly effective manner in which they use ITCUs in promoting sustainable development. But a bit more about that. And then finally, my partner in crime, I surprised him a little bit when I said, if not, we're going to break your leg. So I'm very happy that he's also a very good basketball player. Hence I say, if we meet on the court again, be careful. So I'm very happy that you agreed to join. So let me start by throwing the question at Mr. Derks. Mr. Derks, you spoke earlier about this amazing project the UNDP is involved in, but what on earth does the value that, if we talk about cities and culture, is that not a given?
You mean that we take culture into consideration? Well, you can probably hear me, right? Well, it should be, but I think if all of you are interested in this field of work, there's a big difference between what should be and what is. So I think it's important to keep stressing the importance of taking into consideration the difference in cultural backgrounds, not only to let's say to appreciate it, but also to understand how you can best approach those people and to get them involved, to hear their voice, and to make them a part of the process. And well, getting back to the basketball, I always tell my players in the beginning of the season, I'm gonna treat you all differently. And that's very uncommon from a basketball coach, because players expect rules. They think if you have a framework, there are strict rules, people understand what they can expect. But I think you have to really look at the individual and to really modify your approach to that individual.
Thank you very much. If we can build a little bit on this framework that Mr. Derks has introduced, which is very much the notion of peoples are equal, they should be equal opportunities, although we all come from different backgrounds, and there are different processes that we need to put into place to make sure that the playing field or the framework in which we try to operate as a global society needs to be based on an equal playing field. And this is where I would like to ask Madame Gitanjali Shah, could you please explain to us a little bit how the use of internet technologies can bring about a positive contribution to cultural diplomacy and sustainable development?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hans. Today we live in an interconnected world, and everybody is using the internet, and it gives us an equal platform to share our ideas and to network with each other. Information and communication technologies are being able to cut across boundaries, which is the most important thing. We're being able to communicate with each other without being physically present in so many areas. For example, today we have this forum called the World Summit on the Information Society Forum, which is held each year, and we meet to different stakeholders, governments, civil societies, United Nations agencies, and civil society partners, including academics, talk about the network, learn and share about information and communication technologies in this forum. And we have made sure that the people who cannot attend the forum physically are able to contribute to the forum through remote participation facilities. Each room of that forum is connected via a virtual room, whereby you can not only make your interventions but also ask questions and get answers to your questions. So I think today we live in an interconnected world, and the internet is making it very easy for us to communicate with each other. However, there are a lot of challenges that remain in front of us as well. Several people are connected, yet there are several others who still need to be connected, and ITU is working towards connecting the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we please ask Mario Apostolov, within your work, because clearly for you, in your focus is primarily about balance statements and dollars and balance sheets. To what extent do you believe the role, and let's stay with the United Nations as a whole, to what extent do you believe the United Nations understands the value of culture and cultural diplomacy? And the second part of the question, what can be done to further disseminate the good practices in the use of cultural diplomacy to enhance sustainable development?
Well, you asked me a very, very rich question. There are so many aspects in it. Well, first of all, what I do in my job, and it was not exactly what I presented, I had elements of it. We are working on trade facilitation, which is cutting the bureaucracy. We have been working in our organization for 50 years on that. We're producing standards. And the idea is that experts have calculated that you have if you're a trader, you have to submit often repeated information to, on the average, 40 different agencies and 40 different documents. So the idea is to develop standards, make various stakeholders like government organizations, foreign trade, traders agree so that the information is given only once and then it is distributed among the agencies. Basically, this is cutting bureaucracy, which leads to efficiency, to less corruption, etc. But where it comes, you're right, it's not the same thing. My statement was mostly based on the other experience that I had, my academic work and my teaching work. But on the other hand, when we work, to respond to your question, when we work with people, we have to go to different countries, and the cultural environment is quite different. So the most unsuccessful people in promoting our standards, in helping the countries, would be those people who would go and start teaching our partners, like you have to do this, you have to do that, because basically you are not good at that. So this lack of understanding of the cultural background of the interlocutor is a real problem. And in that sense, cultural diplomacy comes down to our everyday work. If we have to work with people from different cultures, we have to take that into account. And there are different people. There are different people working in the UN. There are some who don't succeed with that. They will go down there, they say, to the field, and they would say, like, well, we want to do this, but you're not so good at that. Let me show you how. And this is not the way it should be done. One should understand, first of all, why those people need, for example, these trade facilitation measures, how it can work further, and sometimes there are the legitimate and illegitimate interests on the other side. One has to explain, but through understanding of the other people's position, that there should be things that can change, that can move to the better.
Thank you very much. And just to add to what Madame Shah said, we've just heard the difficulty of, or the limitations, sometimes deliberate, sometimes due to a lack of resources, agency mandates, to actually go down, quote, down there, to go and interact with communities. And this is where the remote participation of the ITU, ladies and gentlemen, do try to follow, because you will see there is a revolution taking place, and this is the only UN agency that I know of, and again, my knowledge is very, very limited. I am learning as I continue to grow up, and I always say, when I become an adult one day, hopefully I would have learned something. But what the ITU is doing is absolutely creating a revolution when it comes to how diplomatic practice is being facilitated at the moment, because not only is it limited to members of governments, but also, as you've heard, members of the civil society, academia, but also commercial entities, and each one can participate on an equal basis. What is more interesting, and just take yourself through the exercise, when you go onto the website of the ITU, and there are different meetings, congresses throughout the year, they actually have the number of greenhouse emissions, the reduction, and they give it a qualitative value because it is measured, it's put into by a group of scientists, calculated, and the result is shown, plus the amount of money that has been saved, because now you can, on an equal basis, based on the rules of procedure of the United Nations, which is not negotiable, but that you can continue to participate, and you can be a mayor, or you can be a member of a small NGO in the most rural community, and that you can participate in an important conference informing world debate on sustainable development, and you can actually now participate on an equal basis. And the ITU is leading this process to make sure that hopefully in the next couple of years, a lot of the other UN agencies will follow suit. So on that, I would like to take this opportunity to say to Ms. Shah and her colleagues, well done, because this is something really that will bring a fundamental change in the way that we practice based on equal opportunities. So on that mouthful, I open the floor for questions.
I have a question about the use of ICT in furthering sustainable development and sustainability. Just I try and explain what can you tell me about your views on the use of ICT as a way of directing people to options for sustainability? So the use of the internet, obviously, and for example, recycling behaviour, travel behaviour. So how do you see ICT as a method of information provision, as it assumes, first of all, that people are interested, people want information on it, and people know where to look?
Thank you. That's an extremely important question, because even for most of our important meetings and forums nowadays, we are looking at the role of ICTs for sustainable development, because it is also contained on, I think, chapter 40 of Agenda 21 for Sustainable Development, where they say that information systems play a key element to achieve sustainable development. So, in fact, we have colleagues who are attending the 0+20 summit this week, and we are organizing a workshop out there under the umbrella of Vorhies. Vorhies is the United Nations group on the information society. So this consists of a group of around 29 UN agencies who are looking at how we can channelize all our expertise in contributing towards how, for example, WHO is looking at how e-health and sustainable development can be linked, and Motaal is looking at how e-trade, and UNDP in the same way how poverty and ICT, the use of governance and poverty can be used. So we're looking at various different ways. ITU in our capacity, we're looking at various other issues like ICT infrastructure and the use of ICT infrastructure for sustainable development. In fact, one of the most important things that you highlighted is the new emerging problem of e-waste. Because there are several communication technology products which cannot be reused or reutilized or actually got rid of very easily. So this is creating a huge trouble of e-waste, and ITU and the United Nations Environment Program are working very closely to make sure that we realize that this is a big problem that is coming up, and we work together already to make sure that this is in the Rio Plus 20 outcomes. So we have already prepared a joint outcome for Rio Plus 20 as well, so that it is taken note of and we are already ready and prepared to take action on this.
In our work on trade facilitation and electronic business, we use a lot ICT, and sustainable development is a very broad concept. It's not just growth, it's quite opposite to growth. Not opposite to growth, but you should not make put a sign of equality between the two. You have to take into account many different things. And many of the countries in which I work, they have a serious problem with corruption. So ICT has this quality of removing the objective conditions for corruption. For example, if you provide, for example, trade information, traders provide the information only once in one agency and then it is distributed, it becomes very difficult to go for corruption, because if you are sharing the information, you are sharing also, you have to share the bribes. If you're sharing the information among the agencies, and this is also an element. If you create such tools which can eliminate the objective conditions for such negative phenomena, we had last December, there was a meeting here on exactly the single window, which is an idea to send information all at once in one place. And there were representatives for various ports. There was a guy from Coetzer, and the chair of that meeting was asking him, what is the basic problem for you? He said, corruption. And then somebody from, I realized this morning, from your country, from the port of Felix, he said, well, this is exactly the point when you introduce such an electronic system. So at some point it becomes unfeasible to do these activities like gather bribes. On the other hand, what I wanted to mention is the idea of internet. I think you had this element in it, how one can get the right information, because the internet is a huge sea of information, and we are moving from a situation when we needed more and more information, we were looking for information, we had sometimes trouble to find it, to a situation when there is this sea of information and we get flooded and we remain again uninformed. So this is a real issue. And also the issue of internet governance is quite important. I don't know whether you have, probably you know all this idea that there is a forum, an internet governance forum in the UN, which looks at such issues, for example, how the internet is governed. There is this ICANN organization, which is more or less a national private business national organization. I believe you are dealing a lot with this issue. And then there is here, which is an international organization dealing with it. And there are so many issues on the governance, like what has to be let in there. And so this is an issue that the UN is taking seriously into account, and there is this Internet Governance Forum under the offices of the UN, which is meeting today.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask you quickly, just in a couple of sentences, just for those of us who do not understand what ICANN is and why specifically you brought up the point, because I think it's fundamental to this debate, just to clarify the limitations and the opportunities of ICANN.
Should I try and then leave it to the specialist next time? Well, ICANN, as far as I know, it's an organization put together by 3 universities in California, which started working on a project funded by the Department of Defense in the United States, and they are managing the domain names. This was one of the issues why this forum started, because this is a very specific organization. Why should it be like this? Then there is but I'm not fully familiar how this arrangement works with WIPO on the
No, I'll just start with that. IGF is also an integral component of the WSIS forum. In fact, we had the IGF open consultations and all the meetings during WSIS, because it's an offshoot of the World Summit on the Information Society. I think while we are talking about information and communication technologies, it's very important for us to not forget the old ICTs. You know, we have the old ICTs and the new ICTs. Can some of you name some of these information and communication technologies? What are we talking about? Anyone? Yes. Emails, yes. Anything else? Anything that you can communicate with, any means through which you can communicate. Mobile phones, yes. The traditional telephones, radios. Radios come under old ICTs now, but they are actually a very, very important means of communication all over the world, especially in Asia. I can speak about Asia because I'm from there. We use a lot of community radio to disseminate information into villages. And for example, this is used for spreading information about disasters and things like that. So it is even narrowcast using loudspeakers. So the whole range is, you know, right from the internet to various different components of technology tools. So a very important thing out here to actually mention is that ICTs are more to create an awareness about when you're using them in the area of development. It is to create an awareness about a lot of issues. And this is where it's been really important. For example, for fishermen to tell them the exact location of the shoal of fish, for for farmers to give them the exact information about the pesticides. So it is a lot to do with the correct information at the correct time and about creating an awareness. So today, you know that even when you look in terms of ICTs for sustainable development, I think one thing is the ICTs themselves, but the other thing is how do you use ICTs to create information about what sustainable development is. Social networks have been really, really revolutionary in that context. And just to quote the Secretary General of the ITU, if Facebook were a country, it would be the 3rd largest one by population, because there are over 8 million users of the Facebook today. So this is a new revolution whereby we are sharing our information and getting interconnected.
Thank you very much. A last question?
I have a question. Also, I think IT is doing a great job, very much great. And there might actually evolve in this area of the internet. The insecurity part of the internet is like the frauding, and also there was once I was on the web page, and if you click on application forms here, there's a warning that there is no fees for application. So people try to like put fraud in this area. What does IT do like to protect
Yes, thanks. Cybersecurity is one of the most important activities of IT. And we have this partnership called the Impact, ISPACT. So if you just Google it, you will be able to see that we're working together with different, the private sector, the government, civil society, and everybody to form different rules and procedures to see what we can do to protect not only the websites and the security of your personal data, but also children, to protect children online. Like what are children doing online? They face so many, who are they meeting online? So there are a lot of awareness books we have come up with also. These are called guidelines. These are guidelines for parents, for teachers, for educators, for governments, to make sure that they are protecting their children online. So cybersecurity is of course one of the most, in fact it is also an action line of the business goals, the World Summit on Information Society that I was talking about. It is the action line C5 and we are all working towards making sure that you must look up the Impact website for more information. Thanks.
I'll jump in too. I just had a question, sort of looking at the topic for the panel discussion and seeing the range of expertise that we have on the panel. We've been speaking about cultural diplomacy the last few days, sort of assuming that that's always a good thing, that it's always a positive thing. And I just wanted to ask you all if you see also any limits for cultural diplomacy or any dangers of cultural diplomacy. We had Professor Doaa gave a lecture a couple years ago at SED, where he was illustrating Osama bin Laden as actually an expert in soft power. He was explaining how bin Laden didn't pay anyone to fund the World Trade Center. He didn't force them to doing it, and he didn't somehow coerce them to doing it. But he attracted them to his interpretation of quote unquote religion that was bin Laden's soft power, according to Professor Doaa. So I just wanted to ask your reflections a little bit on the other side. Are there certain places where maybe cultural diplomacy is not appropriate, or what limits or dangers might you see for cultural diplomacy?
I can say something. Well, what happens? I think if you talk about soft power, and I'm all for that, to have an open discussion, to appreciate everybody's opinion. But in the end, a decision has to be made, and action has to evolve from it. I think in the field we're in, there are so many interests. Everybody has an agenda. Everybody is pushing for their corner. So a danger is that you just keep talking and keep agreeing that you disagree, and no action happens. So I think the most important thing is to make the connection between the let's say collecting all the thoughts, all the valuable content, and then you have to have a structure to really come to a decision. And it's possible within some power, it's possible. But if the circumstances are not there, you have to go with something else.
I'd like to go on that one.
I think what's fundamentally important, we keep on talking about cultural diplomacy, but we've also seen during the last 2 days that we don't necessarily agree on the framework of exactly what is cultural diplomacy. And I think this is where we look at an institution like ICD to come up at the end of conferences like this with a couple of key points, key definitions that we will continue to use. I, in all due respect with one of the speakers yesterday, how culture was taken back into its confines of language and differences and so on. And I think you mentioned the example of Osama bin Laden, and let's open it even more, how horrid the Western world became when we saw how quickly Islamization or the communities started to exist in places where we didn't know. Take the Danish cartoons, ladies and gentlemen, just as an example. Within 20 hours, a highly effective movement was organized. And I think this is again where it's important that it is decided, it's agreed on. Let's take, for instance, this conference. What is the working definition that each one of us, as ambassadors of that agreed concept, that we will take forward in our own communities? We've heard about working in partnership with communities, and I think that bottom-up approach, linking it again back to soft power, link it again, not limited to only internet, but all the different means that they are out there, because there's the pure research track that we have to then start to disseminate this idea of, or the definition with its constituent parts of what it is, and that we, in all these different mediums and media that exist, that we capitalize on that and that we build a groundswell on exactly what it is we talk about. Otherwise, we will continue to talk, as we've heard, and the UN is a very good example of how we talk and we talk and we talk, but we don't necessarily have the clarity of what we talk about. And for me, that is fundamentally important. Ms. Shah.
Well, I don't know too much about the negative aspects of cultural diplomacy, but I just wanted to mention that I think the place where we work in the United Nations, it's actually one of the perfect examples, because for example, within our team itself, I think I have one representative from each part of the world, and we learn and share and a lot from each other, and all of us, wherever we might have studied, we do carry our own characteristics, and I am Indian and I'd always be Indian wherever I am. So we always, so there are always different perspectives and views. We look at the same thing from different angles, from our different experiences, and I think it's really a very, very good example of how all the people from different countries can work together, communicate with each other, and actually come out with results and work as a team.
Yes. Thank you. Well, cultural diplomacy cannot be the panacea. It can't solve all the problems. Well, this is one of the building blocks. The UN has been established. Well, the theoretical background was functionally to build functional cooperation in various areas: human rights, the economy, trade, whatever. And this is basically what the ECOSOC does. You are building different building blocks for the edifice, which would lead to elimination of violent conflict in the political sphere. That was the concept which was very popular in the international relations period at the time when the international organization was created. So this is basically the limit. The EU can't solve everything, but it is a building block, and it should work as a building block in our ways.
Thank you very much. Any further questions?
If I may, just I think I'm interested in the cultural diplomacy aspect, but as I look across the topic of the panel discussion, I think I wanted to underline the point that I think you were all just making there. That really, the cultural diplomacy, I think, can promote the dialogue between the stakeholders. I had an interesting conversation over lunch with one of the participants about South Korea, and she was explaining how in South Korea sometimes you actually have a competition between the different governmental agencies regarding cultural diplomacy. Is it the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Is it the Ministry of Culture? And that was sort of one example, I think, especially in the field of sustainable development, where you have many stakeholders. That can be a challenge as well. So I think that's really where also at the Institute we're trying to flip the definition around a little bit from what it used to be, which used to be essentially promoting the interests of certain governments. Cold War period was flip it. So it's not about promoting, but it's more about facilitating access. And I think if that spirit works also for the dialogue between the stakeholders, then I think we can be not afraid of cultural diplomacy. And I think we can do as much as possible to actually facilitating, making those negotiations easier, enabling cooperation, as opposed to promoting one particular interest over the other. So I think it really does depend how, but I think it can have definitely negative implications. So you just need to be aware of cultural diplomacy, of course, can do the as you were saying, it's not just talking. I think the cultural diplomacy with the political and economic diplomacy can then start translating into action. when it comes to sustainable development. So another very, very good point. And we still have a few more minutes also. If there are other kind of questions or comments from anyone here, we have a very diverse group of speakers. Those are my 2 cents. Please.
Yeah, I just thought I'd add something else slightly related to ICT and as a way of facilitating dialogue in this area. One of the concerns I have is too much dependence on technology and ICT. One of the case studies we did back in England was around climate change adaptation, and one of the things that would happen was no electricity. And then someone said to them, how do I know what's going on if I can't switch on my radio or the internet? And we really, was deciding to live in a culture where people really depend on technology as a means of accessing information. So perhaps we need to have a balance where you do really utilize culture as another way of communicating.
When you talk about this, I was thinking about a movie called Up in the Air. Maybe, I don't know whether you agree with this, but you remember the story when the company, PFC, has used ICT for such a specific activity as firing people. And there was this argument between the older person in the company and the young lady who was promoting ICT, so that people should be fired through teleconferences. And there was exactly this point, human contact is something that we should really look carefully not to exclude from our society. And especially, maybe it can apply to this idea of cultural diplomacy. This is why people are paying a lot of money to have personal meetings and not just teleconferences, not to have the human touch.
Thank you very much. And I really would like to say that I 150% agree to it. Yesterday when we had Mr. Kleinschmidt with us, remember he was saying it's so important in every transaction there needs to be an element of added value. And I think the gesture of human interaction is fundamental in everything that we do. And as Ms. Shah was saying, yes, let's not, and this is where I join you 100%, let us not become over-dependent on internet technologies, because at the end of the day, there is still the human factor. And to come to this notion of exchange between individuals, and that is fundamental in cultural diplomacy. As Mark was saying, it's to try to facilitate, and I made a note, it was to facilitate access. And I think that's important, is it's not about an elitist form anymore. It's really turning it around, and it's very much a bottom-up approach, but where the world is not equal. It is a fact, we know that, but at least that the contributions, the consultative process and the outputs, there is an equal benefit. And it doesn't matter if we are somewhere in a rural community, or if we live in Detroit, or we live in Geneva, the value that we get is of equal value to the whole of humanity, because it's only as a unified whole that we can move forward.
How can I follow those words? I'd like to, because I completely agree with everything that's been said. With my mindset, I focus on local authorities. So I also see a role for ICT in a supporting role to these local authorities in providing the circumstances for the community. If I think about sustainable development in my context, it's about creating a city with good jobs, with education, that's safe for people, that's safe for all the people. And you do it in a way that you enable future, the future generations to still enjoy that city. So the environmental part is part of my approach, but to me it's more about social inclusion and economic development.
And I think that ICT can provide the government with the tools to better manage their cities. We are now in a network government. It's not more. We have all these different stakeholders, so we can use the internet to access all our stakeholders. We can use ICT tools such as databases or management systems for the governments to have a better insight to the city and how to better choose their policies and choose their actions. So I would say, in addition to the human contact, ICT is inexpensive. You need it, but we're social creatures, and I believe that the interaction between humans is critical to everything we do.
I'll just add that for ICTs, human capacity building is absolutely fundamental. So any project that we have in communication technologies for development, we have to make sure that there is a training process around that. And you were speaking about information communication technologies for local authorities. So there are a lot of e-governance projects that are being initiated, but we make sure that for those projects, the governments, the citizens, and all the people who will be benefiting from the project and using it are properly trained, not only to use the technologies, but also to make sure that because it can be disruptive as well. So you have to make sure that you have built the capacities of people around you who will be using the technology to make sure that it is used at its most potential, best potential. Thank you.
May I add something to this discussion? It's intellectually stimulating. Were it not for the fact that we as humanity are actively engaged in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, perhaps my statement might seem ridiculous. We're humans on the planet Earth. But imagine if some extraplanetary intelligence were to come to this planet. It would seem to me, with that level of technological development, that they would too indeed have a culture. And that perhaps they might be faced with some of the same questions that we're discussing today. And so part of what I'm saying is that sometimes we have to get outside the box and step back and look at the Earth as a whole. I would suggest that we have more in common than not. There was a period, I read somewhere that in the year 1900, that there were only 1 billion people on the planet. If we go back a few hundred years, there were only 200 million, and you get the point. So to get to the point that we're at right now, there had to be some commonality, something that gelled us. And I think it's part of the human condition that we tend to come together for a lot of different reasons, survival. And so, that just happens to be the history of our life form. On the question of sustainable development, I'm a cameraman, and so I'm here, I'm listening to everything, and I got all these thoughts running through my head, and I very rarely get the chance to, just interject when I want to, but I'm just taking that opportunity right now. One person's development, to paraphrase the Supreme Court, one person's development is another person's destruction. So that matter has to be cleared up, has to be defined. And it can mean many different things to many different people. On the question of cultural diplomacy, and we were discussing that over lunch, what that is. I'm not upset that we don't have a textbook definition. Because if we did, and everybody agreed on it, we wouldn't be sitting here. I guess, maybe we would. Just nailing down the details. But I think it's important, as I said before, just the only point I want to make is that You know, there's one trip that we all make together on this planet, and that's the trip around the sun. We all make it together. Very few people realize that. There are people out here who don't even realize that we circumvent the sun, and that we make that journey jointly. And that in and of itself should give rise to thought.
Thank you very much. Do know that we appreciate you both as director, cameraman, and your brilliant questions each and every time. It's appreciated. My immediate response to you, which would be a very honest and sincere response, is if there is life out there, that's when I would say, beam us all up, Scotty. Because if we are going to continue to practice sustainable development and natural resource management as we do today, we urgently need to know that there's going to be some other planet that we can escape to, because we are 7 billion people on this earth today. We continue to burn and become increasingly dependent on fossil fuels. We will soon run out of this planet if we do not change by 1 degree the manner in which we continue to claim, as you were saying, the human species. If we don't seriously start re-evaluating our standards of living, and you talk of simple gestures, I let each one of you decide. You touched also on the notion, and this is where I would like to, with respect, challenge you and to say, it's not about a textbook definition. It's about a definition that sets up a framework of action. And I think action is what we need, so that we can interject into the UN, that we can interject in all the different forests that exist, that we can ensure that the framework of reference when cultural diplomacy is used is the one that will be the agreed framework. Otherwise, it can be languages, it can be cultures, it can be, as you say, we go around the sun X amount of times. And then sometimes there's something genius that happens once in a lifetime when Venus passes as well. And I think if we do not have this framework, there are going to be these once-in-a-life opportunities that we will miss. And I think that is fundamentally important, that we capitalize, and I don't say capitalize simply in the sense of monetary value, but societal values, because we are the only species that has the intellectual ability, but also the emotional capacity, and that is what we have. And I think instead of looking at all the differences, let's take those differences and let's celebrate them together. That is what's unique about us, but that is our strength. Please.
Again?
Thank you. Well, yes, it's stimulating when you are saying certain things. And I'm thinking in terms of the topic, what we are discussing here, diplomacy. So what is diplomacy, basically? Diplomacy is a way of communication in order to achieve your objectives. And somebody, a colleague of mine, told me once that it can be defined as the art of the possible. And that comes back to your question. That definition came in a tough situation for me, because I was arguing with somebody who actually was, he used to be vice minister in China. Before that, we were arguing on something very concrete. And my colleague and boss at the time said at some point, well, diplomacy is the art of the possible. You have reached the point where you can't go further, so stop it. And that's also the idea of how to develop this art of communication in order to achieve your objectives. So if you have the objective of living together, you have to adapt a good diplomacy, a good communication behavior. And here comes the point that you mentioned, going out of the box. Going out of the box is a very useful thing. We work in the UN, which is a very bureaucratic organization. There are different people. I have seen many very different managers, and for sure, in terms of cultural diplomacy, those of them who can go out of the box, who are not just following the rules step by step, those are the most successful. We can put in a schema that there are people who go out of the box in order to achieve the objective, and that's where you enter into the culture of the person whom you are talking to. You get interested in what those people are offering you. Then you have diplomats who are following certain communication rules, and bureaucrats, and then you have bureaucrats. For sure, the idea is to be more on out of the box situation. Thanks.
Can you pause for 1 second?